Hello everyone, welcome back to Crockett Creek Brewery. Thank you for joining me again. Tonight we're going to be making a very interesting and not very well known wine. We are going to be making a farmhouse wine out of mushrooms. Now, this video is not originally mine, or this recipe is not originally mine. This recipe came from another home brewer on YouTube known as Happy Homestead. I love his videos, I love his channel. He has a lot of wonderful farmhouse brewing recipes from Orkney, Scotland. I have never tried this recipe before, but I love mushrooms. And so I couldn't resist making my own mushroom wine off of his recipe. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. First off, some things you're going to need. You're going to need about 32 ounces of mushrooms that are sliced. You can buy them whole and slice them yourself, or buy the pre-sliced version. Whichever is your preference. Don't forget to rinse them off and clean them beforehand, but do not use any soap or vegetable cleaning solution. Just rinse them off with plain water. We're also going to be using 4 cups of sugar. This is regular granulated white sugar, and this is actually a lot more than I usually use in my own home brews. I usually use about 2 to 3 cups. His calls for 4 to 6 cups of sugar, if my conversions are correct from imperial to standard measurements. We're also going to use 1 cup of tea. This is regular, unflavored black tea. This is actually an English Yorkshire tea because I wanted to be nostalgic and consistent since he's from the UK. We're also going to be using 25 raisins as a yeast nutrient. His recipe calls for marmalade, but because I live in the United States, marmalade is hard to come by, and I've had it before and I'm not exactly a fan of marmalade. But since he uses it as a yeast nutrient and we use raisins as a yeast nutrient here at Crockett Creek Brewery, that's what we're going to do. I've already measured out all of my ingredients. Oh, you're also going to need a fermentation vessel, whether that be a 1 gallon carboy, or this is a 2 gallon brew bucket. If you want to see how I made this, please make sure you go and watch the last video I posted on how to make this brew bucket. I think this is going to work great for what we're doing tonight. Just make sure whatever vessel you use has enough room to add 1 gallon of water and your 32 ounces of mushrooms. That's why I'm using this brew bucket instead of a carboy. I don't think my carboy will actually fit all of that material necessary for this recipe. So to get started, we are going to need to actually cook our mushrooms. What we're going to do is heat up our mushrooms, slightly cook them, which will extract all of the juices, sugars, nutrients out of the mushrooms, and prepare it for fermentation. So we're going to go ahead and pan sear all of these mushrooms. It's going to take us a little bit of time because, to be honest, this is a lot of mushrooms. So we're going to go ahead and dump these in and start cooking them. Try not to use any oil or butter when you pan sear these. Because that could add off flavors to your brew. Everything you see me using right now has been sanitized in Star San sanitization solution, so there's no worry about bacteria getting into my brew. So as these cook, it's going to take a little while. We'll get back to our next step here shortly. We'll see you then. Okay everyone, so our mushrooms are done cooking. They are a nice golden brown color and the kitchen smells amazing. I love the smell of mushrooms. And as you're cooking them, you want them to be very, very tender when they're done. That way they partially dissolve when you stir in all of your ingredients into your brew. That's going to add to the flavor later. Right now what we're going to do is add our sugar into our fermentation vessel. In this case, it's my homemade brew bucket we made today. Our mushrooms are over here cooling. I'm going to go ahead and take the lid off. Put this somewhere. It's still really, really hot. You want those to cool down to about room temperature so that you can add them to your fermentation vessel without melting anything or without killing off your yeast, because it needs to be about 98 degrees or less to add yeast, otherwise it'll kill them. So we have here our 4 cups of sugar, and I'm going to go ahead and fill up my fermentation vessel with 1 gallon of water. Usually it only takes me 1 trip because I'm using a 1 gallon carboy or something larger than this measuring cup to measure out 1 gallon of water. But I like to use the vessel I had my sugar in so that I know that I got all of my sugar into the bucket, and currently almost all of my glass carboys are full of something that I'm brewing. So this is my only option, so bear with me. Okay, so that's actually about 1 3/4 of a gallon of water, because we actually do have some juices in our mushroom stew over there that are going to be added to this vessel, and this is going to be racked into a 1 gallon glass carboy after a few days. So I want it to be roughly about a gallon when it's all done. Let's get serious. Let's mix in all of our sugar into our water. This is a new step that I've added to my winemaking process when it comes to making wine with whole fruits and other produces. It's helpful to get all of your sugar dissolved first. That way when you add your fruit and produce, it doesn't stick to it, and you get a more proper reading with your hydrometer, and therefore you know how well your brew is actually doing and you don't get a false reading. Well, that was quick. So we're going to let that sit for a bit, and if we have any sugar that settles to the bottom, we're going to keep on stirring it up till it's fully dissolved. A word of warning: if you use a plastic fermentation vessel, don't use anything like a metal spoon or a metal whisk or even a metal bit in your power drill, because that will scratch your plastic fermentation vessel and you will never ever be able to get it fully sanitized again. There will always be little cracks, even microscopic cracks, where bacteria can hide and cause bacterial infections in your brew. Always use plastic, soft plastic, or wooden stirring utensils. So we're going to keep on checking this to make sure all of our sugar is dissolved. And as soon as our mushrooms are cooled down, we'll continue with the process. See you in a sec. All right, so our mushroom stew has cooled down to about room temperature. I've gone ahead and added it to a bowl to help speed up the process of it cooling down. You can see they are nice and brown, and there's quite a bit of juice inside there. I'm really curious to see how this wine's going to turn out. I'm fascinated by it. So we are going to go ahead and add this to our fermentation vessel, our dissolved sugar water. Make sure and get all of your mushrooms. Try not to eat them all. There we go. We are going to go ahead and add our 1 cup of tea. That's going to help add a good mouthfeel to our brew when it's all said and done. We're also going to add our yeast nutrient. Now, in Happy Homestead's video, he used Marmite. Since I live in the United States, I don't have easy access to Marmite, and I don't really like the taste of it. Okay. But we use raisins as a natural yeast nutrient here at Crockett Creek Homebrew. So that's what we're going to do. 25 raisins. Kind of give them a little pinch and split them open as you drop them in. There we are, 25 raisins. We are going to go ahead and stir all this up. Don't be afraid to stir it up really, really good, because you want to add oxygen at this stage of the fermentation process. The yeast is going to need that oxygen to turn the sugars into alcohol. And there we go. Let me go ahead and get my turkey baster and we'll check a hydrometer reading. Okay, so we have our hydrometer and graduated cylinder and our turkey baster. This will help us get down below the produce to get just the liquid for our specific gravity reading. Now we're going to be adding our wine yeast in dry today. If you add your yeast in already rehydrated in a little cup of water, you want to go ahead and add that cup of water with the yeast to your brew and stir it all together before you check it with a hydrometer, because that extra water will actually give you a different reading. There we go. Let's drop in our hydrometer. We added a little much. Okay, This is encouraging. So we have a specific gravity reading of 1.090. That is exactly what Happy Homestead had in his recipe. So that lets me know that we're doing something right.
Yeah, there's 3.
Now, let's go ahead and add this back in. Once I find my packet of yeast, I lost my yeast packet. Oh, it's hiding under our bucket. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and add our yeast. We're going to add about half a packet. That's all you need for a 1 gallon brew. Oops.
Are you sure your time?
And there we go. I'm going to fold this up, put the other half of this packet in the fridge, and we'll use it for another brew in the future. All right, let's mix this up one last time. You want to try and get as many clumps of the yeast dissolved as you can, because I've found in my practice that the less clumps you have, the quicker the brew will start. All right, there we go. So let me fetch our airlock and we're nearly done. Okay, here we are with our airlock. Now remember, you want to make sure it is filled up to the max fill line. Any more and it may spew over. Any less and it may not be able to bubble properly and you may be introducing oxygen into your brew. So the fill line is important. Let us fix it here into the grommet of our new brew bucket, just like so, and attach our lid. The lid has also been sanitized as well. That's very important. Okay, here we are. 1 gallon of mushroom wine. So this is such an interesting wine. I'm fascinated to see how it's going to turn out, and I'm so happy that Happy Homestead did a video on this as well and introduced me to this recipe. I love his videos. Y'all go and check him out over at Happy Homestead. He and his wife have a wonderful family up in Orkney, Scotland. They do a lot of fun stuff with homesteading. You'll see a lot of beautiful country up in northern Scotland on his videos. It's just a great channel, and I get a lot of inspiration from it. So, what we're going to do with this brew is, we're going to shake this, just like that, in the bucket for 3 days. Once a day for 3 days. After 3 days, we're going to rack off the mushrooms. We're going to strain off the mushrooms, and we're going to put the liquid into our glass carboy to continue fermentation. That will keep the mushrooms from spoiling in our bucket and causing our brew to go bad. So we're going to do another video here in 3 days and rack this off. We're also going to put a label on this with what it is, the date we have started it, and our original gravity. That way we have reference of where it's at and so we can check it in the future and see how it's doing.
They asked if I had-
Thank y'all for joining me tonight here at Croc Creek Brewery for this really bizarre mushroom wine. We'll see y'all in the next one. Take care now.